Sleigh bells ringing, diamonds blinging, carols singing.
Hi friends, it's Gwen. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to share my 2024 reading stats with you. And I do have some new things to share this year. So let's go ahead and start off with the books that made me laugh and cry. In years past, I have made a separate video about that, but I haven't been the best at tracking it. But I do remember a few from the beginning of the year that made me laugh and made me cry. So I want to share those with you now. So the ones that made me laugh: Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher, Happiness for Beginners by Catherine Center, Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, and Funny Story by Emily Henry. And then the books that made me cry: The Collected Regrets of Clover by Miki Bramer, Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, Final Offer by Lauren Asher, and then funny enough, Just for the Summer and Funny Story both made me laugh and cry, so they are on the list again. Next up, I wanted to talk about the books that I reread, because I did reread 8 books this year. So the 8 books that I reread this year are The Collected Regrets of Clover by Miki Bramer. That was the first book that I read in 2024, and it was a favorite reread. Then I reread And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie in January for my And Then There Were None challenge over on Patreon. The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay, all by Suzanne Collins. I also reread The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and then I reread The Inheritance Game by Jennifer Lynn Barnes in the same month, mind you. And then I also reread Bunny by Mona Awad. I think the first time I read it was in 2019. So I did that for a project that I did over on my podcast, where I did a deep dive analysis with Elizabeth from Reading Riley and Summer from Seasons Readings, and that episode is really detailed and I'm really proud of that episode, so I will have it linked down below for you. So those are my laugh and cry and rereads, and now I just want to go into the normal stats that I share, starting with like what I read each month, and we'll just go from there. So I do keep track in my Paper Source planner. I have a stats page that I kind of track everything all throughout the year. So how many books I read each month, the format that I read the books in, their target audience, when it was published, the rating, and the genre. So I'm gonna go ahead and break that down for you. We're gonna go by how much I read each month. Okay, so in January, I read 16 books. In February, I read 18 books. In March, 31. April, 23, May, 13, June, 14, July, 23, August, 14, September, 14, October, 21, November, 12, and so far for December, 12. Okay, so obviously there's still a few days left in December. I'm still in the middle of my December reading. So there will be a couple more books, so maybe like 14, we'll say. But as you can see, March is my month that I typically read the most, and that's because I read a lot of graphic novels for Let's Get Graphic, which is a 24-hour readathon dedicated to comics, graphic novels, manga, those type of things, and it's only 24 hours, but those things are so short and so quick to read that you can read a lot. Last year I read the most in March, with 12% of my reading happening in March, and this year I even bumped it up to 14.8% of my reading happened in March. But you can see from the graph on the screen kind of the breakdown of what I read every single month. Let's see, which month am I the most shocked by? I guess none, really. I mean, I'm not really shocked, but the fact that I read so much in March is kind of crazy. One thing that I did quickly want to touch on is just the amount of books that I read and kind of the breakdown of what that actually means. So on Goodreads, I set my goal at 100 books, and I read 211 as of today. So it will probably be a couple more. But let's see, last year I read 208. The year before I read 220. The year before 181. The year before 144. 108, but like 83, 85, 75. you know, those type of vibes. But since I do this for my full-time job now, I do read a lot, but it's actually not that many novels. And let me explain. So one thing that I also did this year as I was marking down my wrap-ups for each year is I wrote a little sticky note here at the bottom, how many novels I read and how many like middle grade graphic novels, short stories, novellas, those type of things. And I have a list of, I kind of tallied everything up, and this is only through November. I have not included my December stats in this yet, but as of November, I have read 132 novels. So of that 211, only 132 were actual books, novels. 6 of them were middle grade, 16 of them were graphic novels, and 44 forms of short fiction. I just kind of put it all together. So whether it's a short story or a novella or a novelette or any of those other little things. So 132 novels. So it's not as much as it actually seems, but I do keep track of everything that I read, and Goodreads counts everything the same. But I just want to share that. The number seems a lot bigger than it actually is, and that's okay. But I will, over on my podcast, be sharing even more updated stats and information because I'm doing a best and worst over there with my best friend Jessie from Reading with Jess. So definitely check that out. That actually should be up probably on Monday. By the time you're watching this on Monday, you'll get a lot more information. So check out my podcast, Talk Bookish to Me. It's always linked in the description of all of my videos. Okay, now let's go ahead and move on to the stats, starting with the format. I read 20 physical books. That means without the audiobook, without the ebook, reading with my eyes, I read 20 physical books. I listened to 29 audiobooks, which means just audio, no other forms. I read 16 ebooks, which is quite amazing for me. And then I hybrid read, meaning I either listened to the audio and read along physically, or I read physically and did the ebook, or, you know, some kind of form of like dual reading. 139 books, okay? So if you look at the graph, I have 9% physical, 14.3% audio, 7.9% ebook, and 68% hybrid. Which, funny enough, I went back and watched my 2023 stats video, and one thing that I said in that video was that I was hoping to hybrid read less than I read that year. So I hybrid read 78.8% in 2023, and I also read 0 ebooks. This year I bumped up my ebooks and my hybrid went down. So about 10% less hybrid reading this year compared to last year. And low key, I'd like to make that even lower next year for 2025. So we shall see. Moving on to the target audience, I read 15 middle grade, 23 young adult, and 165 adult. So yeah, that's pretty average. So I read 80.8% in 2023, and this year I bumped it up to 81.2% to adult fiction or nonfiction. For my star ratings, I had 36 5-star reads, 45 4-star reads, 70 3-star reads, 36 2-star reads, 12 1-star reads. I had 5 that I did not rate, and more than 15 DNFs. I think it was like 16 or 17. Last year I had 29 5-stars. This year I had 36. So that makes me very excited, but here is the breakdown of all of my star ratings. Again, more information over on my podcast. coming soon, so definitely check me out over there. All right, I do in my planner keep track of when things were published, like if I got an ARC, if it was a new release, or 2023, 2022, 2021, 2020, and anything older than that. So on my graph, I just like did a graph if it was a new release or if it was a backlist title. But I had 85 new releases and all the rest were backlist. So if you look at the graph, there is 58.1% new releases, which is up from 36.5. I read 36.5 new releases in 2023, and I have 58.1% this year, and then 41.9% for backlist titles. So it's almost split, but a little bit more new releases than backlist titles. And then finally, I broke down the genres that I read. I read 7 contemporary, 5 dystopian, 5 fantasy, 13 historical, 19 horror, 3 literary, 6 nonfiction, 41 romance, 5 sci-fi, 59 thrillers, 23 mysteries, 2 classics, no poetry, and 16 graphic novels. Last year, I didn't read any poetry. This year, I didn't read any poetry. I used to be in my poetry era, but I think I'm going out of it because that's 2 years now that I haven't read any poetry. So will I read poetry in 2025? I have no idea, but we will find out at the end of 2025. Okay, so my biggest genre is thrillers. It was last year. It is again this year. That makes me so happy. So last year in 2023, I read 25% of my reading was thrillers, and I said I wanted to bump it up, and I did. This year, I read 28.6% thrillers, but you can kind of see the breakdown of all the different genres that I read. But thrillers and romance are always at the top. Always, always, always. And thrillers always come out on top. Thank goodness, because that is my favorite genre. All right, so in last year's video, I asked in that video if anybody had anything else that they wanted me to track. And my friend Lena from Lena's Bookshelf said that she would be interested to see how many new authors I read and how many repeat authors I read. So I did keep track of that for this year, and I am happy to report it's almost split entirely down the middle. So I read 42.9% new to me authors, and 57.1% of the authors that I read were repeat. So let me explain what that means. So if I read, one of the new authors that I read this year is Ellie Marney. The first book that I ever read by her, I counted it as a new to me author. Any of her other books that I read this year, she was a repeat author. But yeah, almost completely split, which is so interesting to me. I will say, I think it's a lot to do with the short form fiction that I read this year, but I do have a list of the 90 brand new to me authors that I read this year, and I thought I would just show them some love by shouting out their names. So the 90 new to me authors I read this year: Christina Henry, Rebecca Ross, Sarai Wilson, Stacey Hart, Kate Quinn, Terry Parlato, Jessica Joyce, Sean Nell and Shawnee Gibbs, Erin Hahn, Sylvia Doy, Kylie Scott, Jared Cullum, Jeanette Ario, Remy Lau, Kay Devotte, Lee Dragoon, Ben Queen, Stephen McCrane, Jerry Craft, not sure how to say this one, so I will put it on the screen, Meg Schaefer, M.H. Clark, Anna Raw. Again, another one I will put on the screen for you: Sierra Greer, Elle Kennedy, Ashley Elston, Rosemary Hennigan, Liana Sincotti, Laura Than White, Ivy Picado, Cara Bastone, Amy Tintera, Luann Rice, Jess Lowry, Steve Kavanaugh, Marie Bennett, Amelia Hart, Abbott Collier, Sadiqa Johnson, Ariel Lawhorn, Maggie Shipstead, Pan Jenoff, Melanie Benjamin, Asha Lemmy, Claire Gilmore, T. Greenwood, Jennifer Thorne, K.T. Nguyen, Claire Beams, Sarah Adler, Lily Dancierger, M.L. Chilton, S.T. Abbey, Anya Mora, Emily McIntyre, Parker S. Huntington, L.J. Shin, H.D. Carlton, Bren Weaver, Heather Gudenkoff, Caroline O'Donoghue, Stuart Turton, Richard Sizemore, Latanya McQueen, Judy Bloom, G.S. Carr, Ethan Joella, Suzanne Rydell, Lily Brooks Dalton, Tara Westover, Dane C. Orthlund, Michael Eslowina, Catherine Wood, Tanya J. Scott, Chelsea Mueller, Carrie Winfried, Ellie Marney, Carly Ann West, Marcus Kleiber, Gretchen Sapples, Rachel Gillig, Emma Rosenblum, Kelly Garrett, Sarah Oakes, Chris Whitaker, Allie Carter, Sarah Beth Durst, Faith Chang, Eliza Evans, and Alexius Daria. So those are the 90 brand new to me authors that I read this year. And with that, that is the conclusion of my 2024 reading stats. I read a bunch this year. I found some new favorites, and I cannot wait to share my best and worst with you at the end of the month, so stay tuned for that. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope everybody is having a lovely day or night, and I'll see you guys again in another video very soon. Bye, friends.